This episode is brought to you by Modal Electronics, who enable you to play and perform powerful sound with their incredible synthesizers. You can enjoy vibrant wavetable patches with the Argon 8 series, or you can produce with state-of-the-art analog-style synth textures with the Cobalt 8 series. To check out Modal Electronics' incredible array of synthesizers, go to modalelectronics.com. Modal Electronics. Dare to sound different.
Well, I mean, obviously, I love the Beatles and I love the Stones, but I bet everyone picks those.
So some people do, for sure, for sure. The Beatles probably more than the Stones, just about.
That's interesting. I mean, you know, I love probably every song the Beatles ever did, but I thought I'd just go for slightly different ones. Am I okay on this microphone? Because I've got my Tea with Twiggy.
No, you're absolutely fine as is.
Okay.
I only do my whole thing here because I feel like it makes me look a little bit more credible. To be honest, I found the audio quality on Zoom was absolutely fine.
Good.
And continues to be.
Yeah, actually, when I do my podcast, my producer prefers me to use the big microphone and the headphones, which is fine.
Yeah, I mean it is better, but like Zoom is pretty good. Like
I personally can't tell the difference. But
yeah, kind of me too. But I know.
Are you in New York?
I'm not in New York. I'm actually in Mexico at the moment because I'm in transit to America, and you've got to spend 14 days here. Yeah.
Oh wow! Why are you in Mexico?
Because in order to get into the US, my girlfriend has a PR business and she's got some meetings in the US. And I do some work from time to time for that. And so we're traveling over to the US for meetings. But you can't just go straight over into the US. You have to kind of quarantine, as it were.
So you have to quarantine and have a test and.
Yeah, you have to. I mean, obviously, bizarrely, you didn't need to have a test to get into Mexico.
How weird.
We got a test anyway. We thought sort of better safe than sorry. But then in Heathrow, they sort of just ushered us through. Weird time, but it's all sort of quite normal here with face masks and distancing.
Oh, good. Are the restaurants open and things like that?
Everything's open.
Oh, how interesting.
Not in Mexico City, though.
Oh,
that's
where are
locked
you?
down. I'm in Merida, which is near Cancun, because we're flying from Cancun to Miami. It's like a city near Cancun.
Is it warm?
Yeah, it's pretty. I have to say, it's pretty good after about a year in Britain in the same house.
I'm really envious.
Well, apparently they're releasing lockdown soon, aren't they?
That's what they say.
So,
we have heard he's going to make the proper announcement a week today. It's looking like the schools. They're rumouring the schools will go back second week in March, and then it will slowly open up. I hope.
I mean, that's got to be the priority. The schools for the children.
Yeah. But they can't open up too soon because then it'll all go backwards.
Well, yeah, it's very true.
But the vaccines are, that's what we have. I don't think we've handled everything as well as some countries like Australia, but the vaccine program is going fantastically here.
Yeah, it couldn't have gone better, the vaccine program. No. And it is a bit weird to see people sort of saying, "Oh, this might not be the way out," or this could be years still to go. Because before it was like, "Oh, it could be years till we get a vaccine, and then we'll be out of it." But now we've got the vaccine, so it's like, and now it's still going to be. That's what I'm finding a bit confusing. But I suspect it's just the media sensationalizing. Well, I think
I'd say one has to be careful, because obviously the media love to keep it going. It's I'm
great for ratings
with the vaccine. I mean, we had our first shots 2 weeks ago, so brilliant. I think it'll be around forever, probably COVID. But they will get it manageable. I hope.
Yeah, they'll vaccinate anyone who's vulnerable, anybody who's over a certain age, or anybody with underlying health conditions, more predisposed. By I think it's literally like 95% or something of the deaths. So hopefully if we vaccinate everybody, then we can eliminate 95% of the deaths.
And I think people will get used to. It was interesting. I was talking to somebody yesterday because you know, they were saying it'd be lovely to get rid of the mask. But actually, I think the masks are quite a good idea for travelling on public transport going forward. I first went to Japan, to Tokyo in 1967. And I remember going on the underground there and people had masks on and we thought it was a joke. You know, we thought, oh, what are those silly things wearing masks? But actually, it's a really good idea. I mean, it wasn't because of COVID. It was just for health reasons that
probably because of other infections, right?
Yeah,
in Asia.
and, you know, catching flu, catching colds. And it's interesting that I think lots of my friends haven't had a cold this year because we've all been isolating and wearing masks. And so listen, if that's the way forward, so we can open up. Let's, you know, we can wear masks in shops and.
Yeah, I don't object to that. I mean, you
can get beautiful ones. I've got some very pretty ones. They're lovely. Make it a fashion statement.
Oh yeah, exactly. I mean, of all the things that there are to complain about and really be worried about and stuff, wearing a piece of cloth over your face or a piece of whatever, you know, is not. It's not high on the list, really. You know.
That's my iPad making funny. I know. Get over it is what I say.
Yeah, I just, you know, for the people who've lost loved ones or the people who've lost livelihoods and stuff, you know, I understand people being really upset and complaining loads, but having to put on a mask to go to Tesco's is not that bad, to be honest.
It really isn't. It really, really isn't.
So I want to start by talking about your 5 favorite songs. Starting with California, such a beautiful song by Joni Mitchell. When did you start listening to Joni Mitchell?
Oh gosh, I've been obsessed with Joni Mitchell since probably. Well, I'm trying to think when Clouds, Ladies of the Canyon album, and I think Clouds was on that, wasn't it? When the Ladies of the Canyon album came out, which I haven't looked it up, I would think it was early 70s.
Ladies of the Canyon.
I think that was her first big album that I knew about. And I was living at that time, I was early 70s. I was living in California, actually. So I just heard that, I mean, that voice and her lyrics, you know, to me, she's a poet and she's one of the all-time great singer-songwriters in my book. And it was, again, very hard to pick one track. You know, A Case of You was one idea, but I opted for California because I just think it's so brilliant and the lyrics are gorgeous and the melody's good. I mean, she's amazing.
Yeah, she's absolutely incredible. and that whole scene. What was it like living in California at that time? I mean, that's kind of when I go to California, I'm always kind of. It's a bit like when people go to London and they're thinking of the Beatles and you go there, it's no longer the swinging 60s. I feel like LA still is awesome if you're a Brit and you're not used to cities like that, but it's definitely not LA of the Laurel Canyon era. I mean, it must have been amazing living there.
It was. I remember, I mean, I went there, I'm trying to think, the first time I went there was very early when I was discovered in London in 1966. And I went out to New York in 67. I got a booking with American Vogue, which was like the echelon of fashion magazine, the top echelon, and to work with Richard Avedon, who to me was the greatest photographer of that era. And I was 17 and a half. So I was really young, quite green actually. And then we went on to California, and that's when I first went there, but that was only a visit. But because when I went into New York, I went in after the Beatles, so there was a lot of press and, you know, hoo-ha, oh, it's a British invasion, you know, oh, there's that cute little girl from England, you know. So when I went to LA, you know, Sonny and Cher threw a party for me. I mean, it was mad. It was absolutely bonkers. But it was amazing. I mean, I'd never, you know, I came from a working class background in northwest London. And I'd never travelled. So suddenly going to New York and then going to LA, it was like, oh my, you know, the palm trees and the sunshine and the beaches and the canyons, which, as you know, are so beautiful. But then I did go back in 73 and I did a film and I met my first husband. And we lived between London and LA all through the 70s. I was very much part of that music scene. And that's actually when I got very into Joni Mitchell and very into country music, which I still love.
Country
Which
music.
never really kicked off in England, did it, country music?
No, I think they have. I mean, now live music, well, pre-COVID, live music was so big and so kind of slick, and they imported everything. They had some kind of annual event at the O2 where they got a bunch of American country artists, but it's never been mainstream because it's like a part of American culture.
Oh, well, I mean, my memory, it's as big as pop in America. The country scene,
sure.
the country, you know. And actually well, God, my years fold into one really, but because I did my first album in England, pop album in 72 or 3, I think. And then I did go to Nashville and I did some recording in Nashville, which was amazing to work with those musicians. Unbelievable.
Yeah, Nashville is such a incredible place.
I'd love to go back now because I'm talking about probably 74, 75. So it was very much the country centre, but it wasn't as big as it is now.
You mentioned Dolly Parton, "I Will Always Love You," which was, of course, there's obviously the very famous Whitney version, but it's important to note. Not many people know because Dolly Parton wrote this, right?
She did, absolutely.
And not many, but not many kind of casual listeners of pop music. I mean, obviously the Dolly Parton version is huge, but like the Whitney version's even bigger.
It's huger, I know. And that was a great version. But to me, Dolly's version of "I Will Always Love You" is just the killer. It breaks your heart. It's, and that voice. The thing about Dolly Parton, that's true about Whitney Houston actually, but it's Dolly Parton in the first 4 bars, don't you? That voice. Nobody sounds like her. She's also, I think, again, one of the great songwriters that I think a lot of people forget because, that whole persona of hers, which is divine, and I love it, that kind of overtakes everything else. But she's actually one of the great songwriters, and I think one of the great singers. And they just had a special on British television of her life story, you forget how many amazing songs she's recorded and written, and I love her. I think she's divine. So I chose that because I think it's one of the most beautiful songs. And if the people out there know the song and haven't heard her version, go get it on whatever you get it on, Spotify or something.
It's an incredible version. It really, and it's people don't realize because Dolly Parton's such a showbiz character as well as being a songwriter. Maybe some people don't even realize that she's a songwriter.
When I was living in California in the 70s again, and she was appearing actually, because what happened, which happens with lots of careers, she was huge at first and then it kind of tapered off a little bit. So she wasn't playing stadiums in the early 70s, and she was playing kind of, nice size concert halls. I was living in LA and we saw in the newspaper that she was appearing in a place about 100 miles north of LA called Oxnard. So we booked some tickets and we got in the car and I drove over 100 miles to see her. She was absolutely amazing. And I was glad it wasn't a big venue because you could, when you're in a smaller concert hall, you can really get to see somebody. Yeah. She was amazing. And very funny and very, she's just the best.
So she was playing concert halls in the 70s. Yeah.
Well, that's where I saw her first live.
Because would she play a stadium now? Probably. Or like at least an arena.
Whether she would, I don't know. She doesn't have to, does she?
No, obviously.
She's got Dolly would.
Yeah, exactly. She doesn't need to do anything.
Glastonbury a couple of years ago, didn't she?
Yeah, that kind of.
I mean, that's a bit big, isn't it? How many does that hold?
Well, because she kind of it was her who kick-started the whole Legends slot thing being a real, because that's like 4 p.m. And is it on the Pyramid stage? I'm not sure, but it's like a 4 p.m. slot, and they got Lionel Richie for it, and they got like Kenny Rogers for it, and they got
Dolly
different legends for it. Dolly did it first and like nailed it, and everybody was sort of saying it was the best thing of the whole weekend. I mean, unsurprisingly.
She is brilliant. She can do no wrong in my eyes.
Yeah, definitely. Such an amazing artist. So I hadn't heard No Regrets by Tom Rush.
You hadn't?
I hadn't. I loved it.
Isn't it amazing? Had you heard the Walker Brothers version?
No, but I checked that out as well. I wasn't familiar with the song. I mean, what song? When did you first hear this?
Oh gosh, when did he write it? I didn't.
I think it was back in the 60s.
It's got to be the 60s. When I first heard that song, it just you know when songs get you kind of in your stomach, and it's just like every time I hear it, it was funny because I made, when I knew I was going to do this, I made my list, and that immediately went on because it's been one of my favourite songs since he wrote it and recorded it that first time. And then the Walker Brothers did a version which was probably in the 70s or 80s, I don't know. I'm not very good with dates, actually. But they recorded it, and I absolutely adored the Walker Brothers because I think Scott Walker had one of the great voices.
Yeah, absolutely.
We sadly lost him last year, didn't we? Which was very sad.
Yeah, a lot of people have been mentioning him.
Oh, he's amazing. But so the Tom Rush version, I don't know. I heard it and I just thought it was an amazing song, and it really holds up, I think. And funny enough, this weekend, because it was Valentine's Day on BBC Two, Radio 2, you probably know, they do the love songs. And it came on, the Walker Brothers version. I thought, oh, that's so funny, because I made my list last week for this podcast. And I thought,
quite a coincidence.
Somebody else loves the song, because you don't hear it very often.
Yeah, especially on radio. I mean, on Radio 2. Although Radio 2 do sometimes throw in the odd curveball.
They do.
They probably get a bit of a bad rep for only playing the sort of mainstream.
I know.
It's the one thing
that I think America does brilliantly, because in America there's so many different stations, and it covers everything. You can go to an R&B station, a rock station, a country station, a jazz. There's so many choices.
They're really good.
Really have
on Sirius XM. They have all those different channels on Sirius XM in the car, like their satellite radio thing. They've got like 100 different channels, and a lot of it has no chat as well.
That's quite nice.
To be honest, I mean, it depends. Sometimes you get a very good presenter, but sometimes it's a bit just like.
I have to say, anytime we get into it, we haven't been to America for a year for obvious reasons, but every time we land in either, usually it's either New York, LA, and we did some business in Florida for a while. We'd rent the car, get in the car, and I'd always put, first thing was country station, because they're the best. They are really great.
Yeah.
Great stations.
Yeah. You've got a great appreciation.
I feel I'm in America now. I'm really in America. It's brilliant.
Yeah, exactly. I do love that genre, is just because it's not a million miles away at all from rock and roll, kind of pop rock. It's not too far away from anything that.
Well, once it crossed over into kind of country pop, they did merge. I mean, the old country, because sometimes when in England you say to people, "I love country," they kind of think of that old hillbilly, country western music. I don't mean that. It's more of the country
rock type of thing.
Randy Travis, and they've always got great voices as well.
Glenn Campbell. Glenn Campbell.
Yeah, I mean, endless one. Kenny Rogers.
So good, yeah. Kenny Rogers passed away. Was it in 2020?
Yeah.
Early 2020.
Yeah, he did. Bless his heart.
And he did so many albums.
Islands in the Stream with Dolly.
Yeah, of course.
Which was written by the Bee Gees.
Yeah, because they had because Kenny Rogers had such a long career. He did so many albums, and they were saying that there was a huge article about all the various albums that he did. He did albums produced by Bee Gees, albums produced by George Martin, by Lionel Richie, all with different sounds. There was like some obscure tune with Michael Jackson singing the backing vocals on. Like, the guy has done about 1,000 songs, Kenny Rogers. I mean, a lot of these. Dolly Parton must have done about 70 albums.
I mean, uncountable.
Yeah, it was impossible. So the Keeping Faith TV series is where Faith's song by Amy Wadge is from. When was Keeping the Faith TV series out?
Keeping
Keeping Faith, rather.
was the most wonderful TV series, and if you haven't seen it, anyone listening, try and track it down because it's bloody brilliant. It's interesting. They started it. It's all set in Wales, and it was a Welsh company did it, and they did it for Welsh TV, and they did it in Welsh, but they filmed it in English as well. So when they did a take, they do the Welsh take, and I think it went. I think I'm right in saying it went out online in English, and they weren't going to put it on the telly in their great wisdom, and it got such a following that the BBC finally put it out on BBC, and it's absolutely brilliant.
I'm really looking forward to watching this.
And Amy, and it's actually pronounced, it looks like Waj, but it's pronounced Wodge. And I only learned that because when I started my podcast, Tea with Twiggy, I said, I don't know this lady, but I've got to get her on because I love the music to the soundtrack to Keeping Faith blew me sideways. And I had to find out who she was. And I sent, I picked her as a song, a bit like this, but for a magazine, the New Musical Express, as one of my favourite songwriters. And she saw it, and she sent me a message through Instagram saying thank you for the thing. So I sent her a message back and said, I've just started my podcast, Tea with Twiggy, will you come on? And she said, oh, yes. Yeah. So I've just made a new friend in Amy Wodge. And for people who don't know, she co-wrote Thinking Out Loud with Ed Sheeran.
Yeah, I looked up and saw that.
I knew you probably would, but if people
that's
don't,
the best Ed Sheeran song in my opinion. So that's obviously a great.
Although his new, have you heard Afterglow? His new one.
Yeah, I thought that was brilliant. It was much needed, return from Ed Sheeran. I'm quite.
She's such a lovely girl. And I think she's really talented. And all the songs from Keeping Faith are fabulous. But I just picked Faith songs because that's my favourite.
I'm really looking forward to watching Keeping Faith. I mean,
oh my goodness! You've got to let me know what you think because
what an incredible show by the looks of things. Most downloaded show on iPlayer, apparently. As you were saying, which led to it.
Can you still get it?
I'm not sure whether you can still get it on iPlayer. Probably. I mean, if
I know because they did two series. The first series, and last time I looked, I could only see the second series. But I'm not very technical, so I may have pressed the wrong button. But
apparently they're bringing up another one this month, a third series.
Are you Keeping Faith?
Yeah.
Ooh, I'm very happy.
The month keeps getting better.
So it made my day.
Well, yeah, what an amazing thing though to do a show, because how many shows get done in Welsh? I mean, presumably
I know,
some, but
I know. Well, I can watch it in Welsh, obviously. But the lovely thing that Amy said, which amazed me, because again, when you hear the songs and they're so beautiful, she said it was so funny because it was a very little thing. Where she said she was a friend of Eva Miles, who's the star of it and co-producer of it, and she rang Amy. I think they went to drama school together or something. She rang Amy and said, we're doing this TV show in Welsh. So it's not a big thing, but we need music. Will you do the music? And she said most of these songs she wrote in a weekend. And they're absolutely, they're gorgeous. Have you listened to any?
What talent? Well, I mean, I listened to Faith's song and then I did a bit of research on Amy Wodge.
Gorgeous.
I mean, not enough research if I mispronounced her name, but that said, yeah, I looked.
I did. We all did because it's very confusing. She said everybody does.
Yeah.
Because it's spelled Wadge to confuse everyone, but it's pronounced Wodge. Don't ask me why.
So how big has she got? She's obviously extremely talented, but like.
Well, I personally didn't. Until I knew about Keeping Faith, and I looked like you, I looked her up because I was just the first thing I did after the first episode. Who did this music? And the credits came up, and I thought, well, I don't know, and so I looked her up. But then I found out that she actually had won a Grammy with Ed Sheeran and is a big singer and a performer, obviously.
Yeah, what I've heard that she's done is really good. She's really kind of inspired by the sort of thing that I really like kind of James Taylor, a bit, bit of Joni in there.
Yeah.
You know, there are different influences in there for sure. So I mean,
Oh, absolutely.
hopefully
And I'm
she continues
sure,
to go
listen,
far.
all those sort of singer-songwriters, all you say, you know, who's your influence, and Joni always comes up because she's like the queen, isn't she?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, she's unquestionably one of the greatest artists of all time.
Absolutely
Every
right.
aspect of what she does is incredible. Singing, lyrics, the
Yeah.
chords, the tunings, everything. So amazing. I mean, one of the best vocals of all time for sure is your final song, "Nothing Compares to You" by Sinead O'Connor.
Oh my God, that still dissolves me into tears. Have you seen the video of that?
The music video, I think I have.
It's just it's a close up of her face,
Yeah,
and she had a shaved head. I mean, she's
yeah,
quite young, obviously, and her head is shaved, and it's just those eyes, and she just, and I think a tear goes down her cheek at one point, and it's like, you know, it's one of those, so little means so much. It didn't need anything else than that voice, because it was written by Prince, right?
yeah. It was written by Prince, but to be honest, Sinead O'Connor's version is
Oh, I love
the
Prince.
vocals. Yeah, me too. I mean, I couldn't be a bigger fan of Prince, and I love his vocals always. But this vocal is the perfect. It's one
Yeah,
of the best vocal performances of ever.
I think so. And again, I love songs that really get your heart, and as you, because I love.
Mm.
I've never been a huge kind of fan of music where you can't hear. It drives me mad if a song comes out and I can't hear the lyrics, because I love lyrics.
Mm.
That's as important to me as the melody. Because
Yeah, I agree. Well, I mean, I always say my taste is a bit vanilla because I really like lyrics that you can hear, melodies. I mean, it's quite old school. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff now where you just can't make head or tail about what they're singing about, and there's no discernible melody. And people are sort of saying this is a 5-star project.
don't you think
Don't get
that's
it.
why Ed Sheeran broke so hugely? Because he does what Joni does, what Amy does, what you know, they all did is write beautiful songs with beautiful melodies and lyrics that kind of get your heart.
Yeah, I do. I do think there's a lot in that. I think also his work ethic. I mean, what an example he sets with his
I know,
work ethic.
I know.
Like he was sleeping on the underground apparently before he broke, and
Amazing.
playing like 350 shows a year, 2 a night. And I think there was a stage where he like kind of broke down because he thought he wasn't going to make it.
Wow, amazing. I don't know his full history actually. I knew him when he broke, but
Yeah. I mean, I'm
it does-
not as kind of I'm not as knowledgeable about him as about old.
but it must. But I often think it must be so. Well, I'm sure you included. It must be so hard. Now we'll forget about the COVID year, but even before that, of breaking into the music business, because it's so, you know, in the old days, you if you were lucky enough to get a record deal, you kind of did it that way. And I know a lot of artists got cheated, but at least they got their music out there. But now I mean, I don't really understand it, how it happens. You know, you hear of people recording in their garage and putting it out on online and getting a hit, which is fabulous, but it must be so difficult.
Yeah, I think it's more or less. I reckon it's more or less the same, apart from to get the record deal, you have to already be popular, because they have the record companies, you know, their businesses. So they'll just see, like, if you've got loads of listeners, if you've got a huge social media, they'll be like, okay. And I think it is pretty much impossible to get to Ed Sheeran level or, you know, Ariana Grande level, Justin Bieber, that type of thing, without major label backing still.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's very, but getting that deal is really tough. Mind you, it was probably tough in the old days.
It would have been. It would have been. I think, you
but
know.
that slightly, well, you know, because in the performing world, I heard a young actress friend of ours was saying that she'd been up for a role. You know, she wasn't famous or anything, but she was a working actress, and she'd been up for a role in America, and she'd got down to the last two, and she's a really good actress, And in the end, they went with the other girl, and the producer came in and said, we're really sorry about this. We actually preferred your work, but the other actress had a much bigger social media following. And I find that quite worrying, really.
Well, I mean, that is the point. It like sometimes the quality doesn't matter, the talent doesn't matter, because it is about following. It is kind of it's almost a different thing. It's like being an influencer.
Sad though, isn't
part
it?
of it.
Maybe maybe it's my age group, but I just find that. I mean, I understand about the social following and that it's important in this world, but to pick somebody because of that over somebody they thought was more talented, I think that's a bit worrying.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's I think the quality of music in the top 40 is way down. Like, I'm always listening to old stuff. I think there is obviously still some great stuff.
How old are you? You're really young.
I'm 30.
Oh, you're a baby.
I listen to all the old stuff. I listen to 60s, 70s. I do listen to new stuff too, but I'm just saying the overall thing is like a focus on Instagram.
Yeah, I mean, our kids do. I mean, our kids are older than you, but then maybe it's because they grow up with us playing that music. But my daughter, who's in her early 40s, she still plays. And she's now got kids, and she's playing them the Beatles and the Stones and Joni Mitchell. Or my granddaughter's called Joni after Joni Mitchell because we thought it was such a lovely name.
It is a lovely name.
So she's learning it, but it's lovely, and so it'll be an ongoing thing, But it's interesting anyway.
Some of the people at the moment in the limelight do have a lot of talent. Like I do think The Weeknd, Dua Lipa, that type of stuff, it is good, but it is just a bit when record.
Oh, I think there's some smashing people out there actually. There's some really good. I don't even know all their names, but I hear them on the radio and things, and I think there's some really talented people out there.
And how do you find adapting to social media and all this? Like, how do you get addicted to social media?
Not really. It took me a while. It was never part of our lives. Presumably you grew up with it. Well, when did social media really kick in?
I mean, Facebook was like 2008, so I would have been 2007, so I would have been like 17, 18.
So you were teenagers. So I think it's much more natural to your age group, and maybe a few years above that, than my age group, because obviously to us, and at the beginning I thought, I couldn't be bothered with all that. But actually, as it grew and grew and grew, and then if you run a business or you're doing something, and people would say, and my daughter actually was the one who kept saying, "Mum, you've got to have an Instagram account." And I said, "But why? People know me. If they want me, they could." She said, "Yeah, but it's a cool thing to do." And she said, "I'll help you with it because I find it, a bit boring actually to do it all. So we do it together, and she posts it for me because she's much quicker at it than I am. But she said it because." There's so many old pictures of me, as you've probably seen. And she said there'll be great things for, Throwback Thursday and, all those ones. So we post a lot of those. I personally draw I don't do any personal photographs of my family. I don't do that. But I know
good thing to do.
I think it's a choice. My choice is that's my private life. And so my Instagram is all about, and obviously when I started doing Tea with Twiggy, my podcast, it was great because I can post about it, and I post it like Charlene Spiteri started today. We recorded that a couple of weeks ago. So I post them when they're coming out. So, it's very handy to have an Instagram following.
Yeah, for your career.
Yeah, for my career. But I would find it too intrusive for it to be about my, I never post pictures of my children, or they're grown up, or my grandchildren, definitely, because I think that's their life, and it's too.
I think that's such a good rule. it's really worrying, like, because obviously you're using it for your career and it's a great thing. You've got a big following on social media, but I think it becomes really unhealthy when you have, because you're people are always thinking like, oh, I want to get more likes, I want to get more follows. And when you start using your personal life and the things that you do, your behavior day to day in your personal life to try and get more likes, I know that sounds ridiculous, but people genuinely do that. You'll look around at dinner and they're taking photos of the champagne or something.
I can remember being in LA quite a few years ago, before I was doing social media, and one of my friends, every time we went to a restaurant, she'd photograph the blooming food. And I said, what on earth are you doing? I'm posting it. I said, well, don't do that, just eat it. I thought it was insane, but
and also like things like like a honeymoon or a christening and you're filming things and stuff, and it's like, and
I'm glad you feel the same, because I feel, and that's where I think it can be a bit like, listen, it's probably going to grow, because the new generation, my grandchildren's generation, they'll grow up on it, won't they?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what I think, starting at 17, 18, like even then it was a bit like, when you're that young, you get really paranoid if you haven't been invited to something, or you're like, oh, what are these people doing? Or, you spend a lot of time worrying, like young people get like that. And it would be way worse at like 12 or 13 or 14.
And that's the area I think is rather dangerous, because I think especially teenagers are so, listen, whatever you look like as a teenager, you hate it. You're either too small, too tall, too fat, too thin. You're blonde and you want to be dark. You've got curly hair. You want to, whatever you've got, you don't like.
Yeah, it's very true.
And if other people play on that through social media, which is kind of what I've read about, I think it's very, very dangerous.
Yeah.
I don't know what one can do about it. I don't know. Got any ideas?
I think it's just like trying to balance the amount of time you're on it. I have no idea. I feel very bad for this aspect of parents, because like obviously all kids want to get on the iPads and the iPhones and be on social media with their friends. So you don't want to like control them too much, but then at the same time you don't want them to be glued to screens.
Very hard. And as you see, we didn't have any of that. We didn't even, when my kids were teenagers, there weren't even mobile phones.
Yeah. Well, we wouldn't have had mobile phone. Like I didn't get a laptop till I was like 13, 14 at school. And even then, like that sounds young, but like people are getting iPads when they're 2 years old now.
Oh, how stupid.
Well, I mean, it is true though. I've spoken to parents who are like, yeah, I'm giving my like 6-month-old like an iPad so that they get really good with technology.
Oh my goodness.
And so,
well, they do, as I say, my little grandchildren, they do work when they're at school. They haven't been at school for a while, but they do work on the iPad, and she at 5.5 is really good on the iPad, but they use it in their schoolwork. And my daughter and her husband try and keep it down to, using it at the right time and not over letting her use it. It's really difficult.
Yeah, it's difficult to balance that.
I didn't have to balance that, but anyway.
And so you've got a podcast which is going really well. Called Tea with Twiggy. When did you start this? And you mentioned in your email that you liked Adam Buxton's podcast, which I love as well.
I love him. He really makes me laugh. And actually, he came on last week.
Wow, is that out yet?
Pardon?
Is that out yet? The Adam Buxton one? No, not out yet. I'm looking forward to that.
Monday. I was very nervous actually. I said to him, "My good, I really." Because I don't really get nervous. Because when I started, it started about, I was asked to do it when lockdown first kicked in. And again, it was an idea coming from my daughter about 6 months before. She said to me, Mum, you should do a podcast. And I didn't really know what a podcast was. And I said, well, what do you have to do? And she said, well, you know, she said, we'd been out to lunch with some female friends who were kind of my sort of age group. And we were talking about the 60s and 70s and stuff we'd done. And Carly, my daughter, was listening and said, oh, Mum, you should do it. That was brilliant. People would love it, talking about all that era. And so she said, you should do it. And I said, well, I don't really know how. And then we didn't really talk about it again. And then 6 months later, when COVID happened and everything, I got approached by a company and said, would you like to do a podcast? And my husband came up with the idea of Tea with Twiggy, which we thought was quite a fun title.
It's a great title, yeah.
And then I got really scared and thought, oh my goodness, I've never done this before. But you know, I can chat to people. So I rang one of my dear friends, Joanna Lumley, and asked her to do the first one.
Yeah, that was the first one.
I thought, well, she's brilliant. She can talk like I can. And if I get a bit scared, she'll be fine. Anyway, once we started, well, it's like me talking to you. Once you start, it's just like chatting to a friend, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. It's more like when they're just about to start, you're like a bit like, oh, you know, how's it going to go? I mean, not really now, because I've done about 300. But
I say, when did you start yours?
I started it about a year ago.
You've done 300 in a year.
I've been really hammering away at them because I get very restless. You know, I love it.
Well, you've met amazing. I saw the list of some of the people you've done.
Yeah, it's been one of the best things of my whole life. I mean, when we started them, they were face to face. So we did some cool ones in a lot of cool ones in LA, like David Crosby. He was talking a lot about Joni Mitchell. I mean, he's quite a sort of a shooting at the hip type. So he made some funny statements, but I sort of thought, you know, I'd never try and like say, you know, I never try and take up too much time and all the rest of it, you know, never mention anything about myself, you know, in that kind of way of bothering people. And especially with the time, you know, like people are busy, etc. So you want to stick to your allotted time. But and David Crosby said, you know, oh, I've got a health appointment a bit later. So I kind of was especially conscious of the time, but then he kept on wanting to keep the interview going. I sort of did the interview about half the normal length. We only, after about 25 minutes, I like looked over at the people filming and I was like, right, I think that's it. And yeah, he wanted to keep going. And
so did you say filming? Were you filming it?
Yeah.
Oh, it was filmed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, it's been amazing. But I mean, you would obviously, I mean, on your podcast, you're a natural at doing it. And that was always going to be the case. But did you listen before?
Sorry?
Did you listen before to podcasts? No.
I did, because my daughter Carly told me, and that's how I knew about Adam Buxton.
Adams, yeah.
And I love them. You know, when he takes his dog for a walk and chats away about what he's been doing. And I just found them very kind of, well, and also his ones are very different. You know, he does very different sort of people. Most of the people I've done are either people I know and people in the business. Although I did interview an NHS nurse right in the middle of the first lockdown when it was really horrid, because we thought it would be a nice thing to do because, you know, God, they've been the heroes of the hour, haven't they?
And what was that like? I saw that. They must have been completely.
She was amazing.
She was called Lucy, wasn't she?
Yeah, Lucy, and she was Australian actually, and she'd come to England. She was amazingly brave. She said, you know, it is horrendous. It's horrendous, but she was very positive that they could come through it. But you know, it was just interesting to hear her side of the story, and it just made you feel very humble. And thank God they're there.
Yeah, absolutely. And the great thing to kind of, because before the pandemic, any doctor or anyone working for the NHS that I spoke to was already kind of like really distressed about the situation. You know, they were working hours that were too long as it was. it was already kind of in crisis before this.
I know. So can you imagine? They've really stepped up to the plate, haven't they?
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
I think they should all get major rises myself. If I was Prime Minister, I'd give them all a rise.
Yeah, well, I mean, they seem to be spending a lot of money on all sorts of things. So I think that probably should go up the...
absolutely.
Go up the chain.
Without them? I mean, it's horrendous how many people have died. But without them, more people would have died.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean... They're heroes. They're heroes. I mean, great thing to have them on, to have Lucy on the podcast.
Yeah, she was fabulous. She was amazing. I should actually, if she's still around, I should maybe do a follow-up, because that was a year ago.
Yeah, well, hopefully, as the vaccine program, gets, continues to go well, because it's gone very well in the UK, as we were saying. Hopefully, it can be a more celebratory one.
The great thing about podcasts, you can listen to them all around the world, can't you? Because I get messages from people, who've listened in America and Australia and, Europe, lots in Europe. And so that's the great thing about them. And
also you can listen to them back forever. People can discover the podcasts that you did in 2020, that's 5 years from now, and they'll want to, because you've had for my listeners who obviously appreciate music, you've had quite an assortment of musical legends, Richard Marx, Ronnie Wood, Lulu. I mean, we're talking Rufus Wainwright, we're talking some serious...
Well, I knew the others, but I didn't know Rufus. Again, I wrote to him and asked if he'd do it. I didn't think he would, because I'm a fan, and that's, And that's what I did to a few people. There's a guy, Phil Rosenthal, who does a program called Somebody Feed Phil, which is, if you've never watched it, it's absolutely brilliant. He's a writer, comedian, and he goes around the world tasting food and going to different restaurants. And I wrote to him via Instagram and said, "I love your show. Will you come on my podcast?" And I got an almost immediate reply with a yes, please, and a heart.
Wow.
So yeah, I'm making new friends as well, which is lovely.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the great things about podcasting, that you can talk to amazing people, of course. And what was Rufus like? Was he? Did he live up to it?
Lovely. He was really, really nice. Yeah, he had a new album coming out, so obviously we talked a lot about that. But also, I'm a great fan of the McGarrigle sisters, and his mum was one of those. Do you know the McGarrigles? You might not.
I don't.
They're worth listening if you like kind of country folk. It was Anna and Kate McGarrigle, and actually I recorded one of their songs. There's a song called My Town that's beautiful. I did that on my second album, I think. But so it was nice, because I could say to him about how much I loved their work, and we talked about that a lot. He was charming. He was lovely. Yeah,
I mean, what a legend! What an incredible songwriter.
I love him because he hasn't followed what anyone else is doing. He's really stuck to what he does. He's a true artist, really, because it's not like, oh, this is in fashion, I'll do this. His music is so different to everybody else's, and it's very theatrical in many ways. I love musical theatre as well, and it leans a lot towards that, I think.
It really does. And what about the people who you knew as well, kind of before, like Lulu or Ronnie Wood? What was that like, having them on the show?
Oh well, Ronnie was hysterical. I love him. I love Ronnie to bits. He's one of the nicest men in the world, I have to say. But the best thing, about talking to Ronnie, we were talking about things we've been doing in lockdown, and he knits. He's a big knit, because I love to knit. And then I had this kind of mental picture of this big rock and roll star sitting knitting. It's brilliant. He's a really good knitter as well.
That is not, if you had to ask me what I thought Ronnie Wood was doing in lockdown, I would not have guessed knitting.
He's absolutely divine. Yeah. He's also a really good painter. Have you seen his artwork?
I think I've seen it very briefly.
God, he's amazing. Look him up online. Unbelievable. He's done a lot of the Stones. I mean, he's really talented.
What a legend.
I think that's what he kind of tried. He went to art school and he was going to do that.
So many of the great musicians from that era all started at art school together.
Yeah, they did,
I mean, it's just a magical time to kind of follow and read about and watch the Beatles anthology. I've watched the Beatles anthology about 400 times. It's so good. I wanted to finish off by asking you. Of course, you've as you've touched upon, recorded a lot of albums yourself and made music. How big a part of your life has that been? Because you've made some great records.
Oh, thank you. I mean, I made my first album, God, in the early 70s, and that's when I went to Nashville and did some recording there. And then in the kind of 80s, I did a big musical on Broadway, My One and Only. That was all Gershwin music. So, I recorded that. And that's the other type of music I love. I love all the music from the 30s and 40s. And actually before lockdown, I was planning, I can't really say who it was, but somebody who's quite well known, who was in a big band, who's kind of not in that band anymore, and we love those sort of songs. So he said we should go in the studio and do some kind of 30s and 40s kind of bluesy things. And we were about to go in the studio, and then lockdown happens.
Well, I hope you managed to.
When we come through this, that'll still happen, because I love all those songs from that era.
That would be amazing.
And that would be fun to do. I love to sing. I mean, it's weird. It's just when you're known, like I'm known for what happened to me in the 60s, sometimes when you kind of go out of that box, it's very hard. What happened to me then, I can never be as big in something else as what happened to me then.
If you're boxed into something already incredibly difficult to remove people's preconceptions of you.
That's why I was so happy when I did the Broadway show, because it takes a lot of hard work and you've got
really
to be very disciplined to do 8 shows a week on Broadway, and we ran for 18 months.
Disciplined and talented, to do that. You can't. Not just anybody can do that. Like it is pretty hard.
I mean, I work really hard, but there has to be something else behind that.
Yeah, for sure.
Get a big hit show going, and we were lucky that the critics liked us. You never know which way they're going to go. But even so, one is always remembered as the 60s girl, who came, that little gammon little thing. But listen, I'm not complaining. Listen, I've had the most amazing career, and I've had the chance to do things like Broadway. I worked with John Schlesinger, the great film director, and did a film with him. I've done about half a dozen films, so I feel very privileged, really. And now I'm doing my podcast.
Of course. Well, Twiggy, thank you so much for coming on the Greatest Music of All Time podcast. I'd encourage everybody to go out there and listen to your music, and of course, more importantly, for the current moment, to go and listen to Tea with Twiggy, your great new podcast. I really appreciate you taking the time to come on the show. Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Thank you for asking me. It's been lovely to meet you.
If you're enjoying the Greatest Music of All Time podcast, you can keep up to date with all of our latest episodes for free by subscribing. If you're watching on YouTube, the subscribe button is located at the top of the Tom Cridland YouTube page. It's also at the bottom right of any video that you watch on YouTube. If you're listening on an audio platform, such as Spotify or Apple Podcasts, you can subscribe at the top of the page.